Tampa. The city of Tampa is celebrating 136 years. Tampa became a city on July 15th, 1887, and we are celebrating its history with our annual Archives Awareness Week. This brochure exchange. The programs were wonderful and well attended. The program the programs were even highlighted on this morning's Channel 8. Today's program will highlight historical events that took place in Tampa 100 years ago. At the end of the program, you will receive a copy of our new program booklet, Tampa in 1923, which features articles from today's presenters as historical photos and more articles on Tampa's history. Before we begin today, we would like to recognize all current and former elected officials who are in attendance. Anybody? Anybody want to run?
Well, I did just run.
Okay.
I just ran for mayor.
Okay.
Well, they did know what.
Okay. Well, you all are important. So thank you for attending. We would like to give a warm welcome to Fred Hearns, curator of Black History at the Tampa Bay History Center. Fred served the city of Tampa for more than 30 years, retiring in 2007 as the Director of Community Affairs. He has 2 master's degrees, one in Human Services from Springfield College and one in Africana Studies from the University of South Florida. He has written at least a couple of books relating to Black history and many more articles. Today, he will be discussing Tampa in 1923, growth, new leaders, and race. Please welcome Fred Hearns.
Well, thank you, Shirley, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll tell you, time really flies. It doesn't seem like a year ago that we were celebrating the city's birthday, and these Julys seem to just fly by. I do want to say that I really am enjoying my new role. I've actually been in it for a little over 2 years now at the Tampa Bay History Center, and we cherish the partnership that we have with the city of Tampa and with other local partners. But with all of the time I spent with the city has always been very close to me. And what we're doing now is telling stories that many people may have never heard before about the history of this city. And in particular, in my role as the curator of Black history, there is a focus on that history in Tampa, which is as old as the city itself. So I just want to mention briefly our newest permanent exhibit, Travails and Triumphs. And how many of you have had an opportunity to see it yet at the Tampa Bay History Center? Okay, quite a few people, thank you. So this is a permanent exhibit, so it's going to be there for a long, long time. It is the history of Black people in Tampa since 1528. And we actually have the names of some of the first Africans who arrived here at that time. And during the Seminole Wars, which some people say it could have been called the Negro Wars because black people were very much a part of those three struggles up until the present day. So a lot of those stories are told at the Tampa Bay History Center. And we have another project that we're involved in now. We're actually working toward creating a Black History Museum at the Encore site in Tampa, the former St. James Episcopal Church. And Ashley Morrow is here. Ashley has some flyers. Where are you, Ashley? Okay, right in front. Some flyers about an upcoming event on the 28th of this month. And so this is a free program. We're going to be focusing on the history of blacks and music in Tampa. So we talk about the legacy of Central Avenue and about other venues, other locations where black people made a difference in the area of creating all types of music from the early 1920s and 30s up until as recently as just a few years ago. So with that, let me get into today's presentation. And as was said, the title is Tampa in 1923, Growth, New Leaders, and Race. So we're going back 100 years. And if we could, let's see, move to the first slide, and let me see if I can pull it up. Let me get to that first one.
This right there.
Oh, okay.
We're just not seeing it on the monitor. There we go.
Okay, is it up there now?
Yeah, and then we just go to,
Okay, and let's go one more. Okay, good. That's where we want to stop. This is a map, and I know you may not be able to see all of the details from where you're sitting, but this looks at the annexations of the city of Tampa from 1853 up to 1961. And it's got some patterns there that kind of show you where the growth took place. Because I'm focusing on 1923, the annexation there. And let's see if this, and it's not doing it. It's on the ceiling, but it's not showing on the screen. So the little lines that go this way represent the area of the city that was annexed in 1923. We're basically talking about Seminole Heights, Jackson Heights, Gary. How many of you know where Gary is? The Gary neighborhood. Okay, sort of eastern Ybor City, sort of in that area. Parts of Tampa Heights were annexed during this period, including the location of the Zion Cemetery. And there's been a lot of discussion about the Zion Cemetery over the last few years in Tampa Heights. That began back in 1901 as a burial ground for black people. Richard Doby, who was a local black businessman, purchased that land, created the cemetery. The last burial took place there in 1921, and his son was buried there at that time. And for almost 100 years, it was almost forgotten or overlooked. There were some people who knew it was there, but some people, I guess, pretended that it wasn't there. In 2019, Tampa Bay Times did a series of stories showing that there are several hundred bodies still buried there. So that was part of the land that was annexed into the city of Tampa in 1923, as well as some of the area we now know as Channelside. That was also annexed in 1923. I'll just mention in one half of a sentence that we are going to talk a little bit about West Tampa today, but Judge Salsina I'm sure is going to do an excellent job talking about that and how it played a role in annexation in the 20s. Also, in 1923, we had a black woman who had come to Tampa in the early 1900s and realized that there was no real hospital for black people here. And so she opened up her home. She only had a 3-room home, not 3 bedrooms, 3 rooms. She opened up her home as a hospital for blacks in Tampa when there was very little alternative for black people who were injured or sick or ill. Her name was Clara Fry. And so from 1908 to 1923, for those 15 years, Clara Fry operated as best she could out of her small home, depending on donations from churches, well-wishers, both black and white, and other people who wanted to support the work she was doing, and charging very little for her services. After those 15 years in 1923, she was able to move to a larger home, and they were both located in Tampa Heights. 1923, she moved into a 17-bedroom facility, two-story home in Tampa Heights, which at that time became the Negro Hospital in Tampa. So we have another photo that I want to move to. We'll come back to that map a little later on. Can you see the Tampa Urban League? Okay. This picture was taken in 1923, and I can see it on my screen, but you can't on yours, unfortunately. But the lady, can you, well, I'm at the red dot. I was trying to put the red dot on the woman I'm trying to identify, and it doesn't work. Okay, there's a woman in a long-sleeve white blouse standing on the right of the sign on the porch. Can you see her? Yeah. All the way at the top? Okay, that's Blanche Armwood. So 1 year before this picture was taken, the picture was taken in 1923. In 1922, Blanche Armwood became the first executive secretary of the Tampa Urban League. And we talked about Blanche Armwood a lot last year. But in addition to that, as you can see, she had a real interest in young people. These are students at the Harlem Academy School, which was a very short walk away from the Tampa Urban League. And Christina Meacham is off to the right. I don't know if you could see her in that photo, but Christina Meacham was principal of the school, and Blanche Armwood had taught at Harlem Academy. She also had been a student there at one time. This was 1923, so while we're talking about some of the other things that happened in the city during that time, black people were on the move also. And later on in the 20s, the number of black schools increased under Blanche Armwood's leadership. And much of this was led by the efforts of the Tampa Urban League. The Tampa Urban League advocated for a building that would serve as a high school for black students in Tampa that had never existed before. And that became the Booker T. Washington Junior/Senior High School. So we could go on and on about Blanche Armwood, but this photo again was taken in 1923. During the 1920s, the population of Tampa almost doubled. In 1920, it was about 52,000 people. By 1929, it was over 101,000 people. So as the population of whites grew, so did the population of blacks who were coming to Tampa because there were jobs here. And the city was growing and growing and growing. By the way, during the same time period, Miami, when Tampa had over 50,000 residents, Miami had about 33,000. So we were the third largest city in the state for many years. And during this time period, of course, the cigar industry, as well as much of the economy for the state of Florida, depending on the cigar industry in Tampa, in Ybor City and in West Tampa. Now in 1920, the citizens of Tampa voted to change the system of government from a ward system to a commission system. In other words, the powers that be decided, and there were votes that were taken, the powers that be decided that rather than have the different sections of the city represented by different people, like we have city council persons and county commissioners representing specific areas, the commission government pretty much ruled that everyone represented the entire city. And so This was a big, big, big deal, and a lot of people got involved on both sides of the issue. In the end, those who wanted the commission form of government prevailed. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Now, in 1923, the Florida legislature approved the annexation of the map that I showed you just a moment ago, and they also approved another annexation in Tampa, which Judge Salcinas is going to talk about. One of the things that I like to do as a historian is follow the advice of Professor John Henrik Clarke. Dr. Clarke, who was a noted African-American historian for many years, we lost him several years ago, but his teachings and his writings continue to influence thinkers today. Dr. Clarke said, if you really want to take a look at history and you want to zero in on a specific year or a specific time in history, start there, but then go back 100 years prior to that date and take an assessment of what was going on in that area, in that community, among those people. That will give you tremendous insight into what is happening 100 years later. So 1823, 100 years prior to 1923, the Treaty of Moultrie Creek was signed. And the Treaty of Moultrie Creek was an agreement between the U.S. government and certain Seminole chiefs in Florida. And when I say certain Seminole chiefs, I mean that there was no unanimity in agreeing upon the terms of that treaty by all of the Seminoles in Florida. That was never the case. What was the case is that certain Seminole chiefs agreed with the terms of the Treaty of Moultrie Creek in 1823. And what did this treaty say? First of all, it said that Native Americans, primarily Seminoles, had to agree not to ever go to war again with the federal government. 1923, we had just come out of the first Seminole War. 12 years later came the second Seminole War, and then there was a third Seminole War in the 1850s. So that agreement may have been made by certain chiefs, but it wasn't the case, as we can look at history and see. There were many other battles between the Seminoles and the federal government. The federal government said that if you will cease these hostilities, we will assign land for the Seminoles to live on. However, that land is going to be no closer than 20 miles from the Atlantic Ocean, no closer than 15 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. So you'll be living in the central part of the peninsula. That's where the Seminole reservations were located. And you can imagine one of the reasons for that is if you control the coastline, you control communication, you control defending the area, you can see people coming if they're aggressors, you control transportation, you control food sources coming in and out, you control pretty much everything that sustains life if you control the coastline. The Native Americans were also given cattle for agreeing with the terms of the Treaty of Moultrie Creek. They were also given hogs. They were given money that they could trade with the federal authorities for certain goods and items that they wanted. And that was the agreement. Although, as I said, not everyone adhered to that agreement. So 1830, when Andrew Jackson became our president, and I'm straying a little beyond 100 years, but I want to give you a full picture so that when we get back to the 1923 era, a lot more things will make sense, I think, when you understand the background. So 1830, Andrew Jackson is now president. He had been the first territorial governor for Florida in 1821. It only lasted a few months. But because he had this issue with Native Americans, trying to remove them from the Southwest, the federal government agreed, and he, as president, signed off on the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And by 1838, indeed, the vast majority of Seminoles in Florida had been removed from the state of Florida, along with blacks who were enslaved to many of these Native Americans, and other blacks who were not enslaved to them, but they were also removed from the area, and many of those ships left out of Tampa Bay, sailing across the Gulf of Mexico into New Orleans. Let's go to 1842, the end of the Second Seminole War, and now that we have cleared out many of the Native Americans and many of the blacks who lived in Florida, the federal government came up with the Armed Occupation Act of 1842, which was a really good deal for those settlers who took the federal government up on it. In order to qualify for the Armed Occupation Act awarding of 160 acres of land free of cost, you had to meet certain qualifications. Number one, you had to be white. Number two, you had to agree to be armed and defend your property against aggressors, Native Americans or anyone else. You had to agree to live on this land for a minimum of 5 years. And if you met those requirements, the land, that 160 acres, became yours at the end of those 5 years. Federal government also provided rations and other assistance to the whites who took them up on that offer. In the end, there were some 6,000 people, white settlers, who took advantage of the Armed Occupation Act of 1842, representing some 200,000 acres of Florida land. And much of it was very fertile in the interior of the state. Now let's get back to the 1920s now. And former Mayor D.B. McKay, who had been mayor for 10 years prior to that time, favored the home rule form of local government, where there would be district representation. But there were others who disagreed with him. And so we had Tampa Tribune publisher Wallace Stovall, who headed up the group that formed a commission government club. They wanted to have a commission form of city government, at-large elections, where there would be 4 city council members or 4 city commissioners and 1 mayor. And Bob Kirstein said in his book about Tampa history that about the only difference between the mayor and the other 4 city commissioners at this time is that the mayor got to preside over the meetings. But everyone's vote was equal. The mayor had no more power than any other of the other 4 city commissioners. Also during this time, from 1910 to 1947, a period of 37 years, and some folks say it lasted even longer than that, we had in Tampa the White Municipal Party. The White Municipal Party said that only whites could participate in local elections of persons running for office. Blacks could not vote, nor could they run for office. One of the things that I believe was one of the causes for the White Municipal Party being formed in 1910 is that there was a black attorney in Tampa named Z.D. Green in 1908 who ran for a municipal judgeship, which he had every right to do. But just after the qualifying deadline had ended, Z.D. Green was told that his application had been lost. And so no one could vote for him. 2 years later, the White Municipal Party was created to ensure that no black would ever get that close again to running for public office in Tampa. And it remained that way until 1947, the White Municipal Party. D.B. McKay, who had been mayor, as I said, prior to 1910, helped to organize a 25-member group called the Home Rule Club. And again, he differed from Stovall in that He wanted home rule, representation of different wards or different sections of the city. McKay included women on a committee that was advocating for home rule. At this time, as you know, 1920 women got the vote. Now, they were not given leadership roles, but they were given vice presidential roles with this committee. Kate Jackson was one of those women. That's a name many of you probably are familiar with. We have a beautiful recreation center in South Tampa named for Kate Jackson. Kate Jackson, the daughter of John Jackson, for whom Jackson Street is named. So the family had deep ties to the city. Kate Jackson was in one of those positions. The other was given to Frances McFarland, Hugh McFarland's wife. And if you've ever driven down Howard Avenue in West Tampa, Howard's named for her son, Howard McFarland. Mayor Charles Brown actually served as the first mayor under the commission form of government. And as they were advocating for the commission rule, which was sort of diluting the power of the individual districts and putting it at the head of this organization, they also had a female, Julia Norris, who was appointed one of the committee chairs. So you could say these were token positions, but they did include women in advocating for the commission form of government. And we think about what things were like in the 1920s and then realize that it took 50 years to have the first woman elected to Tampa City Council. 1971, Catherine Barger was the first female elected to Tampa City Council. Almost 50 years after this commission form of government was formed. It took several more years, 1986, before Sandy Friedman became the first woman mayor of the city of Tampa in 1986. The Charter Review Board that was looking at how to set up this commission form of government, and I keep going back to that because that kind of was the number one issue during the early 20s in Tampa in local politics. The board consisted of 15 people, all white men. All but 2 of them lived south of Kennedy, in what we know as Palmacia. And so you can see that a lot of the power was concentrated in one part of town, which was not the vision of those who wanted ward politics and different areas to have more representation. 56% of the voters who were choosing that form of government decided to go for the commission form of government. Blacks were actually able to vote for the type of government that Tampa would have, because it was not the same as a municipal election where you were voting for candidates for city council or for mayor and so forth. They couldn't vote for that, but they could vote for the form of government that Tampa would have. The Tampa Tribune was quoted after the vote as saying that the better and more intelligent blacks and Latins, voted for the commission form of government, because that's what they supported. And they said of the blacks who voted for the ward form of government, they were idle and worthless. 1920s Tampa. So 1974, and I'm just gonna fast forward now, we have William Poe elected mayor of the city of Tampa. He made an appointment that had never been made before. He appointed an African-American, his executive assistant, Alton White, in 1974. 9 years later, 1983, the first black began serving on Tampa City Council in the 20th century, and that was Perry Harvey Jr. Of course, we still have not had a black mayor in Tampa, but tomorrow is another day. We'll see. In 1923, the city adopted this commission form of government, and I'd call it an experiment that maybe had its place at one time, but D.B. McKay never stopped fighting to bring back the ward form of government in city politics. And eventually he was successful along with others in doing that. So let me go to the last slide here. Okay. So that's where the images come from that I've shown you in my talk as I'm winding down now. And let me just say that as we look at 100 years ago in Tampa, we sort of are able to draw some conclusions about how we got to where we are now. The exclusion of women, the exclusion of blacks, the exclusion of many Latins, that was what was behind avoiding the ward politics, because blacks and Latins had very little representation outside of the ward politics that they were advocating for. But again, the city took several turns with several leaders. Several things took place 100 years ago that I think will help us to understand where we are today and how we got there. Thank you very much.
Fred, would you like to take a couple of questions?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
I've got some
Yes, Doris.
public comment. Kay Jackson, her great niece is still alive. She celebrated her 100th birthday last November. She's still living in her home in Carrollwood, and she is about to publish her 4th book of poetry. So if you are interested in being invited to that autograph party, just as you have to leave, give me a card or something, let me know, because it's a fantastic thing. She remembers very clearly visiting her Aunt Kate when the park was Aunt Kate's home. And, she's a very interesting person. And the other thing, did you see Things Remembered credited to Cantor? That
Yeah.
book, Things Remembered, Rowena Brady wrote that book.
Yeah, he edited the book. Let me
Oh,
see if I can pull it back up.
Jack Moore at USF worked with her, and we need her name on it. It was her book.
Okay, can somebody help me pull that back up? Because you're absolutely right, and that's what the slide should have
She needs
indicated.
credit.
Okay, Things Remembered, an album of African American history.
It is on there.
You can't see it.
Subtitle is blocking it, but it's there.
See her name behind, there it is, 1997, Rowena Farrell Brady, University of Tampa, copyright by Dr. Cantor Brown Jr.
Oh, it does have Rowena Brady on it. I should
Yeah.
have blocked out at the time.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. If you don't know, this is Doris Weatherford, the expert on women and the role of women in Tampa, and I keep her book, Real Women of Tampa and Hillsborough County, close to me, within arm's reach of my desk every day. You see how sharp she is, so she keeps me on my P's and Q's, so thank you, Doris. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You were talking about the Seminole Indians. Would you consider the Timucuan Indians part of that tribe? I'm writing a book about the Timucuans down in the Indian River area, Vero Beach, that kind of thing.
Right.
So, and they lived on that coast. So I guess they got transplanted to the interior of Florida or out to Oklahoma or whatever.
Yeah. Would you say they were the predecessors of the Seminoles, that they were already here before the Seminoles, who with the Creeks came into the state?
Yeah, the Timucuans, and there's another tribe called the AIS. I don't know how you pronounce that, AIS tribe. I'm still doing research on the book. It's a children's book, so it doesn't have to be real accurate.
Right, right. So, but yes, the Seminole story is a fascinating story, and it's still being written, as you know. There's still Seminole Indians living in the state. We just had a program at Tampa Bay History Center a few weeks ago members of the various tribes came in and told their stories. And there's a real parallel between some of the horror stories that they told and the horror stories that African people existed under during slavery and the transporting out of the state of Florida in the 1830s primarily. So a lot of parallels. In fact, there were some people who said that the Seminole Wars could have been called Negro Wars. So, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's hard on nighttime, World War II, I was gonna show you here. This right here. This is my African American people, and by what I dropped, it says right here, lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
It was thought they were unable to fight because we were black. World War II. I was, wow,
He's a vet.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe that,
Thank you for sharing.
I never knew that. I was a ranger, I never saw that.
Right, and you never saw that, so.
I never knew that, all people go around the VA going, I'm World War II, I don't wanna hear nothing again.
Thank you.
And-
Yes, Belinda.
And also, I've written a play, it's about the Black Seminoles, because a lot of the Black Seminoles were here, as you said, before the Seminoles came, most of them came from Georgia. So most people don't really know that story at all. So I'm really, we performed the play overseas, but I'm really looking forward to performing it here in Tampa, because it's really fascinating. It tells the true story of the struggle that existed and the collaboration between the Black Native people as well as the Seminoles and the other tribes that were here. So
Well, I'm looking forward to that. Please share that with us.
I will.
And Ashley?
I'm curious about, I believe, that one of, Armwood's friends, I believe she has a school, a college over in Daytona.
Mm-hmm.
She came over here to, I guess, help with the Central Life insurance and all the things, because Central Avenue was popping at the time. I'm wondering, has Tampa taken those places that have been, very monumental in Black history and cherished them and like to put some time into like preserving them? If they could take that time to preserve those spaces, would we have more spaces still standing today?
Well, one answer to your question, I think, is yes, some of that is happening. I'm a part of the Tampa Soul Walk Committee. And how many of you have heard of the Soul Walk project that the city of Tampa is at? Okay, most of you. So I think that's the purpose of that project, to identify, and they've identified over 100 sites where history was made by Black people. Not necessarily Black history, but history made by Black people, but it's history. So, we say Black history is American history. So Black history is Tampa history. So yes, the city is, I think, taking steps in that direction. And I think we have time, maybe one or two more. Yes.
Hi, my name is Maya. I just first wanted to thank you for bringing this exhibit. I'm sure it took a lot of hard work. I'm from Tampa, born and raised, never knew the amount of history that we had here. And my question is, why is that? Like, there is no continuum of like when we were here, when we first got brought here, how we got here, and just all the way through like the 20s, 40s, all the way into present day. There's nothing like, there's nothing. Like you Google stuff online, like there's a lot of stories like I'll hear through my family and like elders, but why is there like no trace of anything that we have done in the city? And then for the few things I have found out about like Armwood, Middleton, Blake, and just like West Tampa, East Tampa, there's no preservation or there's no initiative to have social and cultural preservation for African American communities. So I guess my question would be, do you have any resources or anywhere that you can share that we can learn more about this history? And if through like the Soul Walk Initiative, I see like there's a history museum coming by Encore, and then also in West Tampa, they're supposed to, I think funds were awarded for one. If there is going to be like a reconciliation or remembrance through those things of like actual accurate history for African Americans in the city.
Okay, beautiful question. I just happen to have something for you here. This is the brochure that I just talked about. Ashley, would you please make sure this young lady gets these? Get her name, get her phone number, get her email address. Ashley Morrow is actually managing a project over at the Encore. You just mentioned the Red Brick Church over at Encore. We're managing a project there, and we have history projects, Black history projects going on there now. We just started last month, so it's still new. So you can get in on the ground floor and help us and bring your ideas. We want your ideas and we want your support and input because we really are interested in reaching the next generation coming along. So we have a lot of these stories. We have a lot of this history. There has been some literature written about it, but not enough. I do as many talks as I can, but not enough. So we'd like to hear from you and get some input as to how you can be a part of this.
Thank you.
Fred, question, when is your next book coming out? And Ms. Weatherford, same
Yeah.
question.
I'm sorry, but,
When is your next book?
oh, thank you. I wrote a book, for the Athena Society on the history of women in Tampa, and it covers Black women, Latin women, white women, and it's available at the History Center bookstore, I think. I hope, I haven't checked lately. But you can go online and find it too. The title is Real Women of Tampa and Hillsborough County. And it covers the Seminole Wars and the women who were involved in that. And starts with the very first coming here in 1528.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, there were women on all 6 of the exploratory trips of Florida before it was settled in 1565. There were Ponce de Leon, not Columbus, but there were 6 trips from Cuba and from Mexico and finally from Spain. And there were women on all of them.
So there may be another book coming, but I can't give a date. But Shirley always asks me that question. So with that, Shirley, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Jennifer?
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Fred.
Thank you.
Oh, wow, okay, thank you. We got 2 this year.
Really, I can listen to them all day, both Fred and E.J. Salsinas. It is now my privilege to introduce the Honorable E.J. Salsinas, retired appellate judge and former state attorney, Hillsborough County. He is a native of Tampa and a career state and federal prosecuting attorney with a legal career spanning more than 55 years, including 16 years as the elected state prosecuting attorney, serving more than 14 years on Florida's 2nd District Court of Appeal. He has 2 academic degrees, including his law degree, as well as 3 honorary doctorate degrees, including one he just received this year from USF. He is a recognized local historian who has produced documentary programs on Tampa's history entitled Tampa, Untold Stories, which can be viewed on the City of Tampa television and YouTube. He is also a 2021 recipient of the Medal of Honor from the Florida Bar Association. or foundation. Today, he will be talking about the annexation of West Tampa. Please join me in welcoming E.J. Salsinas.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a hard act to follow. Fred has given you a condensed version of a lot of history. My assignment is an easy one. EJ, what was happening here 100 years ago? Thanks to the chief of the archives, we've gone into the old records, some of them with termite residue, but they were there for us to research and find what was happening in Tampa back in 1923. Of course, as has been promoted, we are celebrating the 136th year of Tampa. And it so happens that this year we are at the eve of the centennial celebration of the annexation of the city of West Tampa. The modern city of Tampa, as we know it, was born, as the Great Seal of Tampa shows, July 15, 1887, 136 years ago. Our neighboring city of West Tampa was created a few years later, May 18, 1895. They coexisted, like Charles Dickens used the term, the tale of the two cities. We too have the tale of the two cities, the city of Tampa and the city of West Tampa. That changed with annexation. Annexation, as I will explain to you, is a form of growth, a form of expansion of cities, municipalities, etc. Each of these two cities had their separate municipal governments, and both produced enough quality cigars, handmade cigars, that gave Tampa the title cigar capital of the world. We were producing more handmade cigars here in Tampa than even Havana, Cuba. So we were titled the capital of the cigars throughout the world. The city of West Tampa, on the west bank of the Hillsborough River, operated as an independent city for 30 years, from 1895 to 1925. I brought for you the seal of the city of West Tampa. You notice that there are two horns of plenty, and the star at the very top gives you the influence of the Cuban cigar makers, and that was the lone star in the flag of Cuba. It was all incorporated into the seal of West Tampa. When you travel through West Tampa, you find historical markers that have this seal remembering the city of West Tampa. They were always trying to merge the city of Tampa with the city of West Tampa. But the city fathers in West Tampa would listen with a friendly and fraternal ear, but they would say, "Thank you, but we're not ready. Perhaps someday we'll join forces." Famous Mayor D.B. McKay frequently came to West Tampa, trying to convince the city fathers Listen, we could do so much more if we could join both economies, if we could bring both populations together. Mr. McKay, thank you very much, but we're yet not ready. That went on for years until 100 years ago, something was in the air, and the city fathers decided this is about time that we merge our cities. West Tampa was always under the leadership of an outstanding Scottish-born Tampa attorney, Hugh Campbell McFarland. Many of you enjoy McFarland Park in West Tampa. That was donated by the founder of West Tampa, Attorney McFarland. We remember him frequently. He was never mayor of West Tampa. His son was, but not he. And in West Tampa, we had 8 elected mayors and 221 city councilmen in the 30-year period. As Fred has so eloquently described to you, Tampa had changed in what I think was really an experiment. Let's change our type of governmental system. And they went from the ward system to the commissioner-manager system, as Fred has explained, where there was a mayor, but they didn't call him just mayor, mayor-commissioner. He had as much authority as the other 4 city commissioners. Instead of calling them city councilmen or aldermen, as we have called, they were called city commissioners. And they hired a city manager to run the city. They would set the policy, they would establish the ordinances and the regulations, but the local city manager ran the city of Tampa. Under the leadership of Charles H. Brown, the first experiment term was underway. He was the mayor commissioner from January 1921 to January of 1924. That experiment, as I call it, lasted for 7 years until the voters reenacted the old system of ward system, where every section of the city had representation. All of this came together during the spring of 1923, 100 years ago, when they all agreed it's time for us to merge. The meeting of the minds had occurred, they shook hands, and both city leaders would meet with the legislative delegation to prepare the necessary legislation to bring about a vote from the voters. Do we want to merge the city of Tampa with the city of West Tampa? And 100 years ago, in May of 1923, the legislature did just that, and they also set, if there's going to be a consolidation, an annexation, it's got to take effect on January 1, 1925. And that's how it went on. They had agreed West Tampa would be annexed, but also Seminole Heights, Jackson Heights, and as you said, Gary, which is just east of Ybor City, as well as other unincorporated territory that the voters approved in a vote referendum that took place November of 1923. It passed by a large majority of voters. Anticipating that the voters were going to approve the annexation of the two important cities, the city of Tampa bought the Tampa Waterworks Company in anticipation that annexation would occur. EJ, what exactly define for us what is annexation? Annexation, as I said, is a form of growth, a form of expansion, growth in size, growth in population, growth in income, growth in taxation, growth in industry, growth in factories, employment, services, recreation, parks, and a lot of recreation. But you must also remember that annexation must take place according to the laws of annexation. You just don't decide, let's annex Brandon. Let's annex Ruskin. Let's annex something else. There is a formula set by law that has to be accomplished. And so the consolidation of both cities was amicable, and the merger takes place in 1925, where the city of West Tampa had grown in those 30 years that it was an independent city to be the 5th largest population in the state of Florida. By merging, Tampa and West Tampa became the 3rd, almost the 2nd largest population in the state of Florida. So that catapulted our importance in state government, in state activities. Both the city of Tampa and the city of West Tampa knew that on that particular day, the government of the city of West Tampa would cease to exist. But how about all the employees that the city of West Tampa had in its many departments? Well, all of that had been worked out by the two committees that the city of Tampa had designated and the city of West Tampa, working out where are these people going to fit in the fire department, in the police department, in the sanitation department, in the waterworks, etc. All of those details had been worked out. Mr. McFarland, together with one of our famous cigar manufacturers, Angel Cuesta, we still remember Cuesta and Ray cigar factories, and we had John Drew, one of the major land developers of this area. We had Drew Field, Drew Park. Drew Field eventually became Tampa International Airport. We had Tom Fisher, which was an owner of one of the cigar box factories. If you had so much cigars, you needed boxes for your cigars. That was a big industry that we had in West Tampa and Ybor City. And of course, the mayor of West Tampa at that particular time was Enrique Enriquez, and he presided over these different negotiations. Who was the mayor of Tampa, mayor commissioner, that had followed Mr. Brown? It was Perry Wall II. He was the 2nd mayor commissioner of Tampa. As I said, that experiment didn't last long. Within 7 years, the mayor-commissioner system had been abolished, and we were back to the old ward system. Perry Wall was co-owner of one of the very large hardware stores. Those of us that are born and raised here remember Knight and Wall right here on the corner of Tampa and what is now Kennedy, what used to be Lafayette. That was a very large hardware store. And his brother-in-law was none other than a very powerful, important lawyer by the name of Peter O'Knight, for whom we had our early airport, Peter O'Knight Airport over in Davis Island. And so, as all of these things came together, the city of West Tampa was ceasing to exist, and the city of Tampa was now a big, big city. As I said, the third largest, but almost the second largest. And there was a lot of things happening in this area. 100 years ago, we saw a young man with a great idea that he could dredge the bay and create man-made islands. And so he did, and we've got them Davis Islands. His name was David P. Davis. And he came to the city and he said, I am going to give you all enough land on one of my islands for you all to build playgrounds, and if you want, you might even want to consider building a hospital there. We had a small hospital on North Boulevard and North B, which was called the old Gordon Keller Memorial Hospital. The city fathers were about to build a more modern hospital there, but they said, wait a minute, let's see how that so-called island develops. We might want to build our new hospital there. Well, they needed a bridge to go from what you and I now call Bayshore to get over into the island, and then the islands, plural. So a new bridge was built, and eventually Tampa General Hospital became the hospital that was going to be called the Gordon Keller Memorial Hospital, and then it became Tampa Municipal Hospital, and as it grew, it became Tampa General. What a history of that hospital. We also saw, at the same year, 1924, A.J. Sims was developing an area that we call Parkland Estates. Parkland Estates did not belong to the city. That was all in the county. But Mr. Sims did very well, and then decided 3 years later to build the Floridan Hotel. The Floridan Hotel in 1927 was the tallest hotel in all of Florida. Beach Park was expanding, but it was outside the city of Tampa, as was New Suburban Beautiful and Palmacia. They were all in the county. And as promised, Mr. Gandy said, before the year is over, my Gandy Bridge will be completed. And so on November 20th, 1924, just before the city of West Tampa ceased to exist, they inaugurated the shortest connection between Tampa and St. Petersburg. The transition of power from the government of West Tampa to the government of the city of Tampa occurred as the clock struck 12 midnight, December 31, 1924, as we went into 1925. Voluntary, key word, voluntary annexation was accomplished. The two cities hosted an annexation banquet in one of our famous Ybor City restaurants called El Pasaje. The building is still there. The big banquet took place with the best of fellowship and fraternity prevailing as both officials of both cities celebrated the merger full of cooperation. The heads of almost every city department gathered, and Tampa Mayor Perry Wall was the toastmaster. Howard McFarland, Hugh Campbell McFarland's son, for whom Howard Avenue is named, was the representative of the mayor of West Tampa, Enrique Enriquez, and he read a message from the mayor. Representing the cigar manufacturers was none other than Angel Cuesta, who reminded all that the city of West Tampa was, that is to say, the city of Tampa, was receiving the city of West Tampa on a silver platter, with 12,000 new citizens added to the city of Tampa, now becoming citizens of Tampa. And the cigar workers were bringing home $100,000 a week among all the cigar factories that we had in West Tampa. $100,000 a week multiplied by 52 weeks in the year tells you what a rich economy that city was providing. Also speaking at that luncheon was Dr. Sumter L. Lowry Sr., for whom we have Lowry Park. He was on the city council, and he spoke on behalf of the citizens of Tampa, welcoming the citizens of West Tampa. And the last words of that banquet were delivered by none other than the outstanding former state attorney, Hugh Campbell McFarland. As the city of West Tampa was ceasing to exist, a brand new city was just being born. The legislature had created the city of Temple Terrace, with Mrs. Maud Fowler and her son, attorney Cody Fowler, as the founders. As the new year was starting, Joshua T. Richardson started the Sulphur Springs Hotel and Arcade with a spa, with mineral springs and a historic water tower built by Grover Poole and completed in 1927. Soon, Mr. Richardson would sell all of that property to J.F. Hendricks. In time, the city of Tampa did annex Sulphur Springs in 1953, as well as annexing Rocky Point and the surrounding area. In 1925, the city of Tampa population skyrocketed from 51,608 to 101,162, with the annexation of West Tampa into the city of Tampa, becoming the third largest in Florida, behind Jacksonville, which was the largest city with 129,540 population, and Miami, the second largest city with 110,637. In 1925, the Florida state population was 1,263,540. And the land boom in late 1925 drove our population to 1,468,211. But the city of Tampa liked the idea of annexing West Tampa, and they thought that they could shortcut the annexation process and expand their city reach, expanding into other areas. But they didn't follow the law, they didn't follow the procedures required, and it backfired. In December of 1925, the voters had overwhelmingly approved increasing the number of square miles in the new city of Tampa from 19 square miles to almost 150 square miles, adding another 30,000 people in population. But the courts were asked to intervene, and the circuit judge, Francis Marion Robles, for whom we have Robles Park, intervened saying, "You have not followed the law of annexation," and therefore Judge Robles ruled the December annexation was illegal and the land had never been legally annexed nor become part of Tampa. So the attempted annexation did not include Port Tampa, Sulphur Springs, Beach Park, or the city of Temple Terrace. It was not to be part of Tampa because they had not followed the rules and protocol of legal annexation. Temple Terrace today is still an independent municipality, and other areas did eventually become part of Tampa through legal annexation. As the Second World War came to an end and our troops returned from Europe and the Pacific, again, growth took center stage and became the focus of attention. And again, annexation brightened the future of Tampa. Two young representatives, a young Sam Gibbons and Tom Johnson, working with State Senator Branch, decided it's time that we annex legally a whole large area. And that happened. And as a result, we went all the way to where the University of South Florida is now located, all of Drew Park and Drew Field, which is now Tampa International Airport, all of Palma Seca, all of Interbay, all of that area became part of the new Tampa that we're enjoying today. Our population, again, skyrocketed. And through legal annexation, we acquired other areas that we had lost in the court, like Rocky Point and Sulphur Springs. Now, Palma Seca and these other areas were part of the new area of Tampa, and a big expansion in the size of our city came in 1988 with New Tampa. This additional added 24 square miles, mostly rural, increasing the city of Tampa's total land area from 84 square miles to almost 109. We see that through annexation and through growth, Tampa has become a major, not just metropolitan area, but a cosmopolitan. Almost every country of the world has some representation in this great area. So we went from the smallest population state, as Fred described earlier, to today, Florida is the third largest state, the most populated third state in the entire United States. All part of that great gift that God has given us here in Florida, but especially in Tampa. Happy birthday, Tampa. Thank you.
Now we know the rest of the city. Are there any questions? Take a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you.
Speak up a little bit.
Okay, I enjoyed and learned so much from both you and Mr. Hearns. In West Tampa,
Yes?
we still see some of the old cigar factories there. Hopefully, some of them are being repurposed and preserved. But are there any of the original municipal buildings of the city of West Tampa still standing over there?
Well, I can quickly tell you that the old city hall where I used to be taken as a little kid and put on the fire engine to ring the bell, that building is gone. But right next to it, with a marquee that still says Simovitz, that was one of the original businesses that we had. And at the end of that block, we have what used to be called El Sombrero Blanco, the white hat, which was owned by Isidore Konitz. And that building is still there. Moses White had his barbecue place there. The West Tampa Library is another historic center. Thanks to Mr. Carnegie from Pittsburgh, Mr. McFarland had written to him and saying, hey, you're giving money to make libraries. Why don't you give the city of West Tampa money for a library? And Mr. Carnegie did exactly that. And so Tampa has the oldest Carnegie public library. We didn't call it public then. The word was free. If you look at the marquee, it says free library or free school rather than public school. The word free was in vogue at the time. And when West Tampa became part of the city of Tampa, that Carnegie Free Library became part of the city of Tampa. It's still there, a wonderful, beautiful library maintained very well. Our cigar factories are still abundant. A number of them have been torn down. Most of them are now being refurbished for other types of business. We don't have cigar manufacturing in West Tampa, but we do have a lot of beautiful cigar factories that are there, really historic buildings. When you're looking at the cigar factories, remember, the architecture is always east to west. No cigar factory is ever built north to south. Why? Because They didn't have electricity. They didn't have air conditioning. So the sun rises on the east and sets on the west. They could take advantage of the maximum sunlight and, of course, circulation. And if you look carefully, on one side of the building, the windows are a lot larger than on another side because more air could circulate. Those are historic buildings. West Tampa actually had more cigar factories than Ybor City. At one time, we had 200 cigar factories between Ybor City and West Tampa producing more than, listen up now, producing more than 1 million cigars a day. Saturdays and Sundays and holidays included, that's more than 365 million cigars being produced, and all in cigar boxes that said, made in Tampa. Yes, ma'am.
What would you like to see happen to those cigar factories?
Speak up a little
What
louder.
would you like to see happen to those cigar factories?
What was what?
What would you like to see happen to them?
Oh, I would like to see them occupied. There are some, there's a family right now that's refurbishing and putting a wine, a business where they have wine and you come there and you're able to smoke a cigar, and others are refurbishing into apartments. We have the largest of all the cigar factories on Armenia between Chestnut and Spruce. The old Antonio Santaella factory used to have 1,000 employees. Today, there are a number of artists in different floors that are using different cubicles for their artistic endeavors. Yes, ma'am. Oh, excuse me. Yes, ma'am.
You need to mention Fortune Street Bridge. The Fortune Street Bridge and Madam Fortune Taylor.
The Fortune Street Bridge?
Yeah.
Yes.
You didn't include that.
The Fortune Street Bridge has a great history. Those of us that know West Tampa say, God bless the Fortune Street Bridge, which we now call the Fortune Taylor Bridge. The cigar workers couldn't get over across the river to work in the cigar factory of West Tampa. They were having to come across on a barge. So Mr. McFarland and Mr. Benjamin and their associates put up enough money and in 1893 built the Fortune Taylor Bridge over Fortune Street into West Tampa. And then the streetcar came across and West Tampa survived and flourished. So God bless the Fortune Taylor Bridge.
Yeah. And Fortune Taylor was a former slave who got a lot of land in downtown Tampa with the federal government after the Civil War. And so that's why it's named Fortune.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am, excuse me.
I don't know if you mentioned this when I stepped out, but what caused the decline of cigar culture in Tampa?
What did, I could not hear her.
What caused the decline of cigars being made in Tampa? Like, why did the business decline so much?
Why did the cigar industry decline?
Why did it decline? Oh, yes, ma'am, that's an excellent question. We were producing cigars left and right, but then we had the cigar embargo. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy imposed an embargo of anything going in or out of Cuba, and that stopped the importation of the quality tobacco that was being used for the handmade cigars. But for that, it would have still continued. So how have we continued with good quality cigars? Because a lot of our cigar manufacturers took pocketfuls of Cuban seed. And they tried some in Dominican Republic, they tried some in Ecuador, they tried some in Nicaragua, they tried some in Honduras, they tried some in Ecuador, and it started producing. And you have a great tobacco production from those Cuban seeds. Thank you very much. Thank you. Wow. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow, my mother thanks you, my father thanks you.
Let's give him another round of applause. Let's give both of them a round of applause. They were wonderful and have been over the years. Thank you, Mr. Hearns and Judge Salsinas, for being so faithful. We can always count on you. And you have a lot of history. Thanks for sharing. Thank you so, so much. We hope you have enjoyed today's program. We would like to thank the Mayor's Youth Corps for all of their assistance. We would also like to thank my staff, including Jennifer Dietz, the Archives and Records Manager. Please stand up. And the Mayor's Youth Corps. The Mayor's Youth Corps still here? Oh, they're outside? We have some? Please stand up. Let's recognize you. You all have been faithful also. In addition to Jennifer, we have Allison and other staff. Allison Smith, and other staff from Archives and Records. Boy, we have a great team, I tell you. Thank you for the partners. You will see them in the brochure that you have. We thank them. They've been faithful too. Why don't you mention some of those, Jennifer?
Oh, sure. For Archives Week, we have a lot of great programs coming up. As Shirley mentioned, we had University of Tampa. Their group is right here. They did an awesome program yesterday. Sorry, the Henry B. Plant Museum. We had Oxford Exchange yesterday. That was great as well. Tomorrow we have J.C. Newman. If anyone wants to go see the cigar factory there, they've been renovating it, which is awesome. On Wednesday with the Tampa Bay History Center, we'll be doing a program there with Brad Massey, one of the curators. On Thursday, we have the historical marker dedication for the Scrub and the Jackson House, which is going to be going on at the Saunders Library at 11. And on Friday, we're having a Soul Walk history party. As Fred mentioned, Soul Walk is going on right now, and that's going to be a great opportunity to share Black history with everyone. And Saturday, we're doing a walking tour with Dr. Sarah McNamara. She also has a program going on Friday night. She is an author, so she's an author and has published a book. So yeah, lots of wonderful things going on this week. Yes.
I would also like to thank the City of Tampa television station. Aren't they wonderful? You can view this again later. And as I mentioned, Fred and Judge Salsinas, thank you. Almost finished. Thank you for always being here and supporting us and supporting our love for history. We need to get that history out, okay? And thank you, our audience. We really appreciate you. Oh, thank you. In spite of the weather, you came out. And Ms. Weatherford, thank you. I was very happy, or we all happy to see you. Yes, yes. As you exit the program today, members of the Mayor's Youth Corps will be passing out our commemorative booklet I held up a few minutes ago, along with the archives and awareness brochures. Before you leave today, stop by the first floor to see the Tampa in 1923 exhibit in the mascot room and enjoy light refreshments next door to the mascot room in the Sister Cities room. There will be many other great history programs during Archives Awareness Week that Jennifer just mentioned, and we hope to see you there. Thank you very much for coming, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.